Hey, we're going to read chapter 3 from David Mortimer Baxter Promises. Chapter 3 is The Plan. That night, Joe called me 6 times to talk about the election. "Tell Joe you're eating dinner," said my mom as I answered the 6th call. When I got back to the dinner table, Mom wanted to know what Joe's problem was. I explained about the election. "You, class president," said my little brother, Harry. "Are you crazy?" Once I would have agreed with him. I liked just sitting in class with Joe. No need to worry about making speeches or setting an example. But maybe it was time for a change. "Think it builds character," said Dad. "Good job, David." My sister Zoe grunted. The next morning, there were Rose Thornton posters all over the walls in our classroom. There were even some in the cafeteria and the bathrooms, girls and boys. "It was just wrong," said Joe. "Can't do anything in the bathroom with Rose Thornton's face in there. It's like she's watching me." "I wouldn't be surprised if the cafeteria sales dropped," added Beck. I held up a sticker that read, "Vote for Rose Thornton for class president." "She sure has been busy," I said. Then James Go tapped me on the shoulder. "Rose Thornton promised me a meal deal from Chunky Chicken if I vote for her and she wins," he said. "I don't believe it," said Beck. "So I'm wondering what you're going to promise," said James. Looked at Joe, who stepped forward. "As David's campaign manager," he said, "I'm here to tell you that we'll match any promise that Rose Thornton makes, plus more." "What?" I yelled. "Cool," said James. "I don't want to vote for Rose, but, well, you know." Then he ran away. "Joe, I can't afford to do that," I began. That's when Joe opened the notebook he was holding. He must have spent all night working on it. In the middle of the page was a huge circle. Inside the circle were the words "Core Promises." Outside the circle were smaller circles labeled "Promises." There were other labels like "Might Keep" and "Should Keep." Joe pointed to one of the smaller circles. "We just made James a promise," he explained. Then he pointed to the larger circle. "But it wasn't a core promise." "But a promise is a promise," I said. Joe shook his head. "Not in an election," he said. "Watched a movie about it last night. Let me explain. Say you promise to do something. Then, if you get elected, you don't do it. Well, that's okay. That happens all the time. Voters understand that. But if you make a core promise, voters expect you to keep that, unless something comes up that means you really can't keep it." "So a promise isn't really a promise at all?" asked Beck. "Not in elections," said Joe. "But isn't that wrong?" I asked. Joe explained. He had a really long talk with his dad the night before. Mr. P explained the way elections worked. Promises and core promises. You do anything it takes to win. I was still trying to work it all out when Jake Davern came up. Rose had talked to him about a meal deal offer, too. Rose was walking around school like she'd already won the election. Joe and I were talking about the latest match on World Wrestling Mania when Kaya-chan came over and sat next to me. She gave Joe a little wave, and I watched his ears turn red. "Do you have a campaign manager, David?" asked Kaya. "Yeah, me," said Joe. "I have something for you," she said, handing an envelope to Joe. Then she ran off, giggling. Joe opened it carefully, like the envelope might explode at any moment. Inside was a note that looked official. "What does it say?" I demanded. "Rose Thornton wants to have a debate before the election." "No way," I said. "You have to," explained Joe. If you don't, people will think you have something to hide. But Rose uses big words, I said. She'll try and trick me. She'll probably get her mother to write her speech. Don't worry, said Joe. You just need to figure out Rose's main points and have some answers ready. It'll be easy. This from a kid who throws up before he goes on stage. A debate with Rose Thornton? Could I possibly imagine anything worse? No.